Oil extraction becomes an ever more important question in the lives of Canadians, and some of them are pushing back, and some of them have decided to start drilling. And even the province of Quebec has decided to get in on the action. Welcome back to the Canadian Shield. My name is Sterling. It's a safe bet that Donald Trump has made some changes in the way that things are happening around the world, how they were going on the extreme left, how the people on the left were utilizing all of the industry and all of the media and a lot of terror to make people be silent that disagreed with them. Of course, these are the same people that would complain if anybody censored them. I find that kind of hypocrisy very intolerable. Like, I can't accept that kind of hypocrisy. Luckily for us, Donald Trump has come along and has the authority and the power to push back on all of these people, which has allowed upper industry, the businesses, to say, you know what, we agree. And so the narrative of the far left is starting to crumble, and the absolute controls that they used to have over people's voices, people like mine, people like other individuals that didn't agree with them, has starting to weaken, which is of course appropriate. If you can't have open dialogue, then your argument is nothing beyond that of being a bully or a tyrant. Now, I have a couple of examples in this episode. David Suzuki, who was once a very reputable scientist, is being sued by individuals out in British Columbia for misinformation. He's being sued under the Competition Bureau because he's putting forward a story that's just incorrect. It's a lie. Like, it's a flat out deception. And that's a violation of many of the broadcast laws that Canada already possesses long before the word misinformation or disinformation became common vernacular. Due to the far left bringing those words into the culture because they are doing those things while trying to project that onto the center or onto the right. Let's start with David Suzuki, and I will get to the astounding news coming out of Quebec. David Suzuki used to be quite a respected scientist in Canada. He had a weekly show. People would watch him. His name was kind of commonplace. Now he's, I would imagine, retired. Maybe he still does some things, but he apparently is quite deep into Canada's or British Columbia's net zero movement and green agenda. He has a foundation set up. Now, he's been called out quite a few times for the hypocrisy, how he's expecting you to live in a certain lifestyle while he himself lives in a very elite lifestyle. Now it turns out that he's trying to, he's one of the people that is trying to say that if you put a pipeline through British Columbia, everything is going to be turned into poop, and that they're doing shale development in British Columbia, and it's essentially destroying the ecology for as far as the eye can see. And people are like, no, that's simply not the truth. So he's being sued. Got this from newswire.ca. All links will be in the description. Northeast British Columbia residents file Competition Bureau complaint against David Suzuki Foundation. A group of 8 residents of Northeast British Columbia have filed a formal application for inquiry with Canada's Competition Bureau, calling for an investigation into David Suzuki Foundation use of the false and misleading imagery in its anti-energy campaigns. I'll just go over, before I show you the imagery that's at question, I just want to go over the key facts. The misleading image has been used on the Foundation's website, social media pages, reports, and donation appeals, which I can tell you straight out of the gate is illegal. It's 100% against the law. Now, I know that the media and the rules and the restrictions and all the kinds of things have been very diluted in this country. And I know that there are many people of certain generations that don't believe that there should be any restrictions from what you say. Of course, that's the difference between the reality of freedom of speech and what some individual who's naive, childish, and immature thinks the words mean. The Foundation has acknowledged the imagery's true use as Wyoming in some contexts, but has continued to repost it on this BC development. You see what I mean? They're not worried about the truth. They're only worried about how much manipulation they can utilize. And then when you try to solve the problem, how can you solve the problem with a person who's not telling the truth? You can't. That is an impossibility. The residents claim this material misleads donors and the public, violating Section 74.01, subsection 1 of the Competition Act. I told you, it's against the law. The complaint is filed under Section 9 and 10 of the Act, asking the Bureau to investigate and impose immediate remedies, including ceasing the conduct, publishing corrective notices, and returning the proceeds. See, that's what has to happen. That's the kind of problem that you have when you mislead. And that's what really CBC, CTV, and Global need to be put up on. Because you have to print corrections, you have to, there's a process that has to happen for you to not be found, like, prosecuted criminally. And the first thing you have to print is a correction. And then, like they said, return all the money. So if they give you back that money because you gave it to them based on these imageries, if you want to give it to them for something else, let's go ahead. Let's do that. But the fact that they raised money on this one image has to go back. Otherwise, they are violating the law. Otherwise, they are a criminal organization. Nothing else. There's no gray area. There's no halfway. You get one chance to correct your behavior. You get one chance to set it right by saying you're sorry, by telling the truth. And then you can go back to doing business. Otherwise, you're going to get pulled in front of a judge. Because that's the way moral code actually works. That's the way making sure that people are honest, that people are getting to the best part of society actually works. You have to be accountable for your actions. Now, here's the image in question. They have an aerial photograph of something that was going on in Wyoming, I don't know how many years ago, but a long time ago, which is a natural gas well. And clearly the environmentalists were not looking after that area at the time. There's lots of times when it wasn't looked after, but those are not the times anymore. And then you can see what the actual area of Montagny looks like just this summer. It's got pine trees and shrubbery, and I mean, everything about that is idyllic. You can't tell me that there isn't people that are actually trying to stop the oil and gas development because they want the land to look exactly like that. So if the land looks like that and there's nothing in the way, what are you worried about? Now you're just arguing against the process, not because you're afraid of the results, but just because you don't like the action. Now you're just trying to exert control over a behavior that you don't agree with, which makes you a controlling tyrant, not an eco-mentalist. Though I suppose in the case of the far left, they are all put together. My argument there is that you're not doing it for some virtue. You're doing it just because you have a desire to be in control. Because the facts are right there in that photo. The facts are that the area looks very pristine, very ecologically balanced. And why then, if that's the situation, would you worry about it? Why would you even complain? Lots of you will remember the Mark Carney saying that Europe is very green and that they're not going to be doing anything against the carbon, and they're going to want to do business with us, not the Americans, because we're going to be very green and the Americans are not going to be very green. Of course, that has all been proven to be false, that the people in the EU are looking to do business with Trump with the steel. They're looking to sell their cars in the United States. In fact, they've gone one step further and have decided to start drilling oil in what's called the protected marine area. Now, there's some evidence to support that the area was deemed protected as soon as they found out there was oil inside of it. However, for Canada, what we need to see is that they are, A, willing to drill because they have a demand for oil and gas, which is something that Canadians have in abundance and could be offering. Again, the cleanest oil, like it comes out of the ground, the cleanest, Canada's. So if you are all about it, then we should be trying to lead the way, never mind shutting it down completely. All links will be in the description. Germany approves the gas drilling in protected North Sea marine zone. Germany has given the green light for drilling as much as 13 billion cubic meters of natural gas at a protected marine site in the North Sea in a controversial step to bolster energy security. Energy security, guys. All of a sudden, the right wing in Germany starts to make a rise, and these left wing who have been telling you that you got to live in a grass hut and that your borders don't count for anything have all of a sudden changed their tune yet again. Because they're not people of ethics, guys. They're not people of moral fiber. They're just people who want the job. They just want the check and the bonuses and the perks that come along with that. And they are willing to do and say whatever they got to do to get the people to vote for them, meaning that they are not so much trying to stand on ground unless they have the support of the people. Now they have the people wanting oil, and that's all of a sudden where their position has switched to, just like you see Mark Carney doing as he slowly but surely takes another plank and another platform from the Pierre Poilievre and the Conservative Party. Skip back to this Germany deciding all of a sudden that they want to be an oil development country. The cabinet approved a bilateral agreement with the Netherlands on hydrocarbon deposits off the island of Bochum. According to a statement from Economy Minister Catherine Reich, Explore One Day BV has already received approval from local authorities over a year ago, but the predecessor Robert Habeck, a Green politician, had delayed the national approval due to environmental considerations. Germany was hard hit by the energy crisis that followed Russia's invasion in Ukraine and has to wean itself off of gas piped from Moscow. It now gets most of its supplies from Norway and global liquefied natural gas markets. Earlier this week, the government lowered the nation's gas supply warning level, arguing that the overall supply security had improved. Well. It turns out that Norway is just selling their oil to anybody that'll buy it. And that's kind of significant for you and I in a minute when I get to the Quebec announcement. But I want you to see how quickly not only will these politicians flip the script, but how relying on one source of energy is a bad idea. They had one source of energy. They were buying Russian oil, and then they shut down all of their steel plants. They shut down all of their nuclear power plants, and they decided that they were going to get all their oil from Russia. Then, boom, they turned off the taps, and they raised the price on Russian oil because of the sanctions against the invasion of Ukraine. And all of a sudden, countries like Germany and Poland and many of the middle EU countries were left in a lurch. Okay, what do we do now? Well, it turns out that they just simply go to Norway and they start to drill their own supply in the ocean that separate, or the body of water that separates them in Sweden, and they're going to share the outcome. They're going to share the supply, and they want liquid natural gas, which of course is the thing that Danielle Smith and Pierre Poilievre have been trying to get off the ground in Canada for, I don't know, 3 years at least. Now all of a sudden, all of Europe wants this LNG. So where does that leave Mr. Carney's position? Where does that leave the Liberal Party trying to talk to you about how the whole wide world is running around wearing wool clothing because they don't want to, do anything to take anything out of the ground? They want to stop all of the development of houses because they want everybody to live in high density. They don't want you to have an electric car or a gas-powered car. Yet in Germany, they're like, you know what? We use this stuff to heat our homes. We use this stuff to generate electricity. This isn't just about putting it in the car. This is about firing up their power plants and firing up the heat in their house and firing up their stove. And they want every drop they can get their hands on. They want it so badly that they have decided to encourage Norway to come in and drill it and start to put pipes under the ocean into the two countries to supply them with a clean, efficient, and secure amount of LNG so that they can give electricity to the people. I think that we've heard this argument from the conservative side of the bench for many years now. And I think further that those of you that sat on the left screaming at us like we were some kind of phobists because we bent a blade of grass, though grass grows back, should now look and reevaluate where you stand in this world and how in your mind you have been completely wrong. And should you really have glued yourself to the road, not so sure that that was the good idea, or throwing your support behind a guy who climbed on the house of a woman who was home alone and started to terrify her and terrorize her because her husband was the premier of a province that manufactures a lot of oil. And now people put him in the parliament. I'm talking about MP Guilbeault. Well. Speaking of Norway's drilling organization, there is a company that out of Norway is called Marinvest Energy Canada that is in negotiations to put an LNG factory in Quebec, an LNG terminal, they call them, in Quebec, out in the middle of the St. Lawrence. Turns out that you can be all fine and dandy when you want to be all anti-carbon and anti-Alberta until the doors to the Americans are closed and you look around, and again, with having only one customer, one source, you realize that your whole system is fragile and that you need to diversify. Welcome to the grown-up world. Anyway, let's get back to this. So quietly it was announced, only on the French media. They didn't talk about it in the CBC at all, for example. Francois Legault is open to an LNG project in Baie-Comeau. Premier Francois Legault is not closing the door on the gas pipeline and liquefied natural gas plant that could see the light of day on the North Shore. The North Shore is the St. Lawrence River. The project, led by a Norwegian company, Marinvest Canada, involves construction of a floating LNG terminal in Baie-Comeau. The structure would be supplied by a new gas pipeline approximately 100 meters long running directly through the St. Lawrence to export Albertan natural gas to Europe. Premier Francois Legault, who was in Sept-Îles on Saturday for an announcement on aluminum, confirmed that the members of his team have already met with the project's promoters. If it's profitable for Quebecers, we'll consider it. If it's not profitable for Quebecers, we won't consider it. Gee, I wonder, is LNG profitable? is there any is there any question in your mind that there's not going to be money to be made? And if there is a question in your mind that there's money to be made, why would they be doing it? The article goes on to say how Stephen Guilbeault and the federal government is losing their mind, and Greenpeace is making a crack and making a comment. I think that you have to ask the people on the ground. This is a perfect example of a need for a ballot question. This is a perfect example of why we should have ballot questions, because you need to ask the people in the area, hey, do you want to have a high-paying job that's going to last for generations in your neighborhood? Or do you want to live in the trees and scratch at an existence and wait for the government drones to come by and drop off the crickets? We can stop talking about this very destructive wind that is causing the whales to wash up in the dozens. We can start to focus on the grown-up reality and how it's better to make the product and keep it clean than to tell ourselves that by touching it, we've done something wrong. The most important, the most significant is the location of Baie-Comeau and how it has a deep water port. It already has a harbor set up there for deep water ships. You can see from the image that it's in basically where the St. Lawrence River starts to open up or starts to close, depending on which way you're coming from, I suppose. However, it's quick sailing past Newfoundland and onto Europe, where they give the LNG product to whomever. I would imagine it'll be in the same terminal that they're talking about setting up right now and in Germany, and they will offload that. However, it doesn't matter because it's the jobs that we're talking about. This is why we need a deep water port in the Hudson Bay, because we don't want to give only Quebec our pipeline. We don't want to have it in one source. We need to have many locations. We need to have many sources. We need the people in the northern part of the country, up where Churchill is, to be benefiting from this product as well. And there's nothing but demand for it, guys. There's not going to be like, oh, we got two of them and now only one of them is being filled. No, it'll be two of them and they'll be like, hey, where can we put a third one? Maybe we run it out the Labrador side. I mean, there's a serious demand for this product, and the demand is not going away. I mean, we just as easily can sail it to Asia. We can just as easily sail it to the global south, as they call it. There's lots of demand for it. The best way we can get it there, though, is through a pipeline. Trains and trucks are not efficient. They're not strong enough. So people who tell themselves that they don't need to build a pipeline and they can move it by train, well, the train is going to cause more emissions than the pipeline. The trucks are going to cause more emissions than the pipeline. And Quebec finally capitulating and realizing that the money is there, and they're going to have to take Alberta oil, and maybe that'll be less than the $13 billion that they were swallowing up from Alberta. It's just the smart move to make. It's just the people being pragmatic. It's just people understanding that it's no longer about being juvenile and immature and starting to look at the pragmatic system. The fact is that the world's using it, and the fact is that we have the cleanest stuff, so we should be the ones that are supplying it. Just like the conservatives have been saying for years. Mark Carney has a book talking about what he values and how he thinks that carbon should be the thing that we value on. Well, he can go run around in Europe and try to trade on that carbon. In Canada, we want jobs, we want a decent life. He wouldn't understand that because he's not from here. I know he was born here, but he spent most of his life not here. And Canadians need to stop telling themselves that it's all about some virtue signaling and start realizing that the house you live in should be half the cost. Because we just don't have enough of them, it's twice the cost. And it's people like Mark Carney's friends that are driving the cost through the roof. And development of our resources is going to give the blue-collar jobs to the people. There's no AI that's going to be able to look after this. And we have to stop as a people and stop telling ourselves that it's all one big giant holding hands. We're all sitting around the bonfire and realize that it's, a dog eat dog kind of situation that we're in. And we have to protect ourselves and look after ourselves. Just like you see all of these countries doing now that Donald Trump has decided to turn the taps off, has decided to close the door, has decided to make the country stop about holding the bonfire and realizing that borders do matter and who lives where and who's doing what can also have an impact and be beneficial to your life. Now, the question is what's taking Legault so long to say, yeah, let's go ahead and do with this? Do you really believe that the people are going to be complaining about it? I mean, there's 15 people that might glue themselves to the road, I suppose, and there might be a couple of other people that'll tie themselves to a tree. But all you got to do is make sure that you give the First Nations, the bands along the way, a cut. Here's a check, excellent. Have a nice day. We'll see you in 90 days when we cut you another check. And everybody will be happy and everybody will be content. And anybody in the First Nations band that wants a job, come on, bring it on. It's just like that. Everybody should be benefiting from it because we're Canadian and we all have the resource and we should all be making the money off of it. That's what we need to be doing. And never mind, oh, I'm this group and I'm that group and I'm the other group. Forget about all of that. Because poverty doesn't care how you identify. It simply does not. And we have to be pragmatic and understand that. You let me know down in the comments, what do you think? Do you think that Quebec should be having that pipeline ready to go, or do you believe that we should keep it all in the ground? I'm going to wrap here. I want to thank you for listening. I'll talk to you next time.